get by. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Wise here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Vivian Gonzalez. You can check them out at parkcapitalsearch.com. And Vivian, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. Since it's part of the top private equity series, I have to mention Keith Burns. Keith Burns, big shout out to Keith Burns and what he does. That's how we met. You'll talk a little bit about how you met Keith, but he talked about building enduring businesses. And Keith discusses how he grew one of the largest medical physics company in the U.S., shares lessons from teaching entrepreneurship at the University of Chicago, and much more. There's another one, Lou Sokolovsky, mastering M&A networking and deal making. Actually, he may be a good person for you to know, Vivian. That was an interesting episode. And then Pete Cunningham, he's more the engine behind growing healthcare clinics. He grew one healthcare kind of conglomerate from 9 to 60 healthcare clinics with his marketing, and they're usually PE backed, and they want to put some marketing dollars behind it, and specifically in healthcare. So that was a great interview as well. Check out more on inspiredinsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect their dream relationships and partnerships. We do it in two ways. One, we're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the strategy, accountability, and the full execution and production. Number two, we're an easy button for a company's gifting. And we make gifting and staying top of mind for your clients, partners, prospects. You know, Vivi, we find even people send it to their staff from a culture perspective. All you have to do is give us a list of your addresses and we'll do everything else. So we kind of call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background to make it stress-free and easy for a company to build amazing relationships. And I've found no better way over the past decade to, one, profile the relationships I have and share with the world that they're working on the podcast and send them sweet treats in the mail. So check everything out at rise25.com or email support@rise25.com. I am super excited to introduce Vivian Gonzalez, the president and founder of Park Capital Search. Park Capital Search is a nationally recognized executive search firm serving private equity-backed and Fortune 100 companies. She's a leader known for delivering high-impact executive placements and championing diverse leadership across industries. She's also a facilitator member of Chief, which is a private membership network focused on supporting women leaders. And we're going to talk about her mission success cycle as well. Vivian, thanks for joining me.
Jeremy, thank you for having me. And additional shout out to Keith Burns, fantastic human, present dad, and successful CEO. So I can't say enough great things about him.
You worked with Keith professionally.
Did. That's part of what we do and why my job is so much fun. He was my client. He was the CEO, had recently gone through partnering with private equity. It was his first experience. And we got to know each other just from, educating on why private equity is a great partner and, how to manage that partnership and leverage it. And that's really part of what makes this so different here is we're not just representing the private equity sponsors. We really care about collaborating with the founders and making sure that they feel heard and they're a part of that long-term goal.
I know one thing you do, you come in, private equity, they want to build out a broader team. They want to grow. So I feel like you may get a set of questions from private equity, and then you come on and you get a whole set of questions from the maybe founders, CEOs. Okay. So maybe let's start with private equity. Before they bring you on, what kind of questions are they asking you to see if it's a fit?
Sure. So, private equity sponsors, they're all different. They have a different approach. Some really have minority investments in their portfolio companies. Some own them 100%. So it's really important for them on what that approach lines up, right, with what their investment positioning is. So we talk through that. We talk through what industries in particular Park Capital tends to lean into. And frankly, while we're agnostic, it tends to really follow the market trends, similar to Keith's success in professional services and healthcare. That has been a big piece of our model, is the healthcare industry. There's a lot going on there, and it's a lot of fun to see these PE sponsors and founders scale. But going back to the question, the sponsors, they want to know that we understand what it is to partner with them. We know what the expectations are with the deliverables, which certainly are high, and we enjoy meeting them. It's not a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 job. Right now we're working on a big transformation, and I have a standing call Tuesday evenings at 6:30. I've got calls that happen to be on the West Coast or Europe. So we work around what the client's needs are.
What are the reasons, Vivian, they bring you on? What are they looking for? I mean, there's probably a slew of reasons, but what are some of the ones, why are they calling you?
There's a lot of competition. There's no doubt in what I do. I think why they call me is I've done this 25 years, so that shows my age right there. They like the timeline. There are a lot of competitors that tend to have 3 to 5 different people involved in a process. Most of them have their front-facing person being someone like me. And then the rest of them are these young new grads. And I believe in really leading the whole cycle of the process. There's a value there, and not only value in making sure that we're ticking all the boxes, but really the timeline many times is cut in half.
Are there certain
Because
types
he's
of
executing
positions?
on the whole process as me.
I know you mentioned niches, and you serve a variety of niches from, professional service to healthcare and more. What types of positions are people wanting you to fill within the kind of private equity sphere?
So we have a unique model here at Park Capital. We have a retained search practice, a separate team. That's what they do all day. And then we have a contingent search practice. Again, most firms don't do it that way. We did that with purpose. So our retained practice really focuses on C-suite, CFO, CEO, COO, chief commercial officers, really the drivers of the business. Do they need to scale that? And then we got to a point where we realized, it's wonderful to scale and build the C-suite, but then we want to make sure that they're successful in their roles. How can we help and lean into them? We place them. So we keep that relationship going and really bridge the gap and passing the relationship to our contingent team. They partner with those C-suite and use our model, also use our intel on how the process worked, what the culture is, what we know so far through all our experience, and placing the teams under them. So it could be a director of accounting, it could be a controller, it could be capital markets, chief of staff. There's so much that people don't see that go on behind the scenes in building and scaling, that it could be a make or break. So we try to make it smooth, easy, and collaborative.
I know you've been doing this a long time. What made you decide to launch your own?
My husband teases me all the time and tells me that I needed to have training wheels, and now the training wheels, I've taken them off. Um, and he's right. What I did this for 20 years working for other companies, um, top performer in those companies, but never really had any form of equity or ownership. And I felt like that was missing. So my kids were in high school, and I said to myself, I've got to take the leap now or never. I did. I think many people don't do it because of the fear behind it, but it's good to be uncomfortable. So I got uncomfortable, and now I'm in a position where I tell myself every day, why didn't I do it sooner? Why didn't I bet on myself sooner?
What's been you are a competitive person, okay? And I'd like to talk your background's pretty incredible. As a competitive gymnast, one of those moments because you take that same thing with obviously what you do at Park Capital Search. So talk about one of the things you had to overcome as a competitive gymnast, because I know you had a slew of injuries.
I did. You know, what people don't know, and Jeremy, I'm sure you probably don't know yourself, is my parents put me in gymnastics with purpose. I was 6 years old at the time, and they had just found out I was deaf in one of my ears. So I can only hear out of one ear. And at that time, doctors said, we need to put her in a special school. And my parents just refused. So they decided, if we put you in a sport, you'll learn what you're weak in and what you're strong in. And then maybe that will really be a parallel to what you deal with every day. So as a gymnast, a lot of it is mind. It's psychology. Your body is capable of doing so much, but what is your mind willing to do? I had multiple injuries, 7 discs that needed to be fixed in my neck, had neck surgery, had multiple broken noses, multiple broken fingers and toes. And many of those times, I just powered through it because it's mind over matter. And I think that's a big part of why, frankly, I loved hiring and partnering with former athletes. I do think there's something that you learn. There's a muscle that you build separate from the muscles you're using. And that, whatever athletic positioning it is, you've got to learn that mind over matter. And in business, your mind can take you through some rabbit holes that you never thought. And how do you push through that to make sure that you're staying focused on what your goal is?
I love for you to talk about the immigrant mentality and then some of the lessons you learned from your parents. Because I feel like the people who grew up in like immigrant households have like a certain drive. They have a certain yearning to be successful. So I'd love for you to talk about that and some of the lessons from your parents.
Sure. My kids give me a hard time every day because I still have that immigrant mentality and they didn't grow up around it. They get to benefit. But my mom immigrated here from Cuba. My dad is from Puerto Rico. He came to the States for college. So he spoke no English until he started at Cornell. My mom moved here when she was in elementary school. And so they started with nothing. They both came from very, humble beginnings. And we moved every 2 years from one state to the next for my father's job, for him to pursue a better job each time. So you can imagine starting a new school every 2 years. I really didn't know what it was to not be an immigrant, a child of immigrants. Because once we would settle in, we'd have to up and move again. So fast forward to high school, we're here in Florida, and we were living in a small 3-bedroom apartment, not in a very good place in town. And my dresser was the closet on the floor, sharing a room with my 6-year younger sister with twin mattresses on the floor. And that's what I make sure I remember every day is doesn't matter how successful I am. I'm still that girl that had that twin mattress on the floor. I don't forget where I came from. But I also know what it is to say anything's possible. What am I going to do with it?
I'm curious from a parent perspective, asking this selfishly, Vivian, like with your kids, how do you instill that hunger and drive in them? Because, they're not growing up, in a one, in two, twin matches on the floor type of
No,
situation. So I'm curious, how do you approach that from a parenting perspective?
having this career for 25 years and the pain and the hours and the grind does not compare to being a parent. I always say it's the hardest job anyone will ever have. So I what we try to do is really keep them grounded, which can be challenging, and instill grit. It's that grit, you can go on to so many different TED Talks. There's some amazing ones out there just around data related to analyzing students in high school and through college and then into their professional lives that grew up with grit, having that tenacity, and those that didn't, that simply just had perhaps a high IQ. Those with the grit always beat out the IQ. And that's what we really work to instill in our kids is, yes, you need to get the grades, but so does everyone else around you. So I lean into that Robert Frost poem of The Road Less Traveled. It's the grit that takes you through the road less traveled. And that's what's going to get you to where you want to go.
Yeah, there's a really good book by Angela Duckworth. It is called Grit,
Yes.
and I think she's got a TED Talk as well. And I think you kind of hit on it with your sports journey. Like certain activities and things tend to build grit, right? Like someone's in a sport, you have to push through some injuries sometimes. You have to deal with competitions. There's a lot there. I'm curious for you growing up and then through high school, like at that point, what did you want to be when you grew up at that point?
Didn't know what I wanted to be. And I think a lot of kids are in that position today. You look at even the millennials that are competing for a spot, and there aren't as many spots for them. What are they going to do, and what do they want to be when they grow up? What I did know was I was going to work and grind at whatever it was because I wanted to have more. I wanted to be more. I'm a big believer in the book, The Purpose Driven Life. And really, you may not always know what your purpose is, but if you have that mindset in everything you do, eventually that purpose comes to you. So I didn't have a roadmap. I don't know, frankly, that a lot of people have a roadmap in my industry that say, I'm going to grow up one day and I'm going to be, an executive recruiter. They tend to fall into
Well,
it.
I didn't know if you were like, oh, I'm going to be an Olympian gymnast or something. I don't know. Maybe that's what you wanted to do at that point in your life.
Well, coming from immigrant parents, of course, they want to have a doctor and a lawyer in every house. So my brother became a dentist. I actually did go to law school, but after a semester, I was 19. I had finished college early. Wrapped that up in about 2.5 years because I wanted to get out there and I didn't want to have to pay more tuition bills. So I went to law school at 19. I lasted a semester and said, this is not for me. I like to talk too much and read less. And so it was just sitting down and really going through that analysis of what would I be happy doing for the long term, not what's going to make me the most money. Because when people do that, it doesn't get them to where they think it's going to go.
I'm curious, Vivian, some of your favorite books. We mentioned Grit by Angela Duckworth. You mentioned Purpose Driven Life. Are there any other favorites, you know, business wise or life wise that you'd recommend?
I have read almost every single book Oprah Winfrey has put out. Fascinated with her mindset and really looking, if you look at where she came from, right? Perfect example of someone that had to really build, didn't have necessarily a plan of getting to where she has gotten to, but took every opportunity to say, if there's a mistake or if there was a pitfall in my life, how can I turn this into a learning moment and success? And I really envy that mindset. I think if people think that way, it will lead to a much more positive outlook, even when that you have those days where you're grinding it and you're exhausted and you're struggling. So would highly recommend. I think she's put out about 4 different books. I've read them all.
It's funny you say that because I think I have over 600 books in my Audible and I have not listened to one on Oprah. So
Oh my
as soon as
gosh.
this is over, I'm gonna go get a few of these on my Audible. So I appreciate you sharing that.
It's a must read.
You know, I'd love to highlight a little bit more, a couple examples here. Just so I and people can understand, you know, how it works, Park Capital Search works. And there was a CFO. And the CFO was afraid to make a move. Can you talk about how that worked?
Yes. So, what I love about what we do is we stay in touch with our CFOs and anybody that we place. We stay in touch with them. We get to know them, their families. We see their growth. I had great story. VP of Finance was ready. Really, he felt like he had been stuck in that title for years.
How did he find
Very
you
talented.
originally? Like, how did you connect?
How
Do
did
you
I
remember?
connect with him?
Yeah.
He came referred to me. And so many
So he
of
was
our
saying,
candidates
"Oh,
and
I need to make a
clients,
change," and he's maybe telling someone I need to make a change, and then they're like, "Oh, you got to talk to Vivian."
yes,
I
that's
got you.
exactly how it happens. And truly, it happens very often in that way. And to us, that is why it's so important that we deliver and we deliver in a unique way that people will remember us. So this particular scenario, this VP of Finance was talking to a friend and said, "Hey, you need to talk to Vivian. She's the person to talk to." So he picked up the phone, called me, said, "So and so had suggested I need to talk to you." I remember that person. Um, we had a great conversation over the phone. And he shared, he said, "I've been stuck in this spot as a VP of Finance. I don't know how to break out. I've, in essence, been doing the CFO responsibilities without the title. And I'm ready. What do I do?" And so, I like to share different directions for people because it's really needs to be based on their current their personal life. Are their kids young? Are their kids out of school? When they're in college and you've got the freedom, you can take on a role that requires a lot of travel. Why not? In his scenario, his kids were in middle school at the time, and he has 2 kids, and his wife wanted to see him every night. So I had said to him, "You need to look at private equity. we can get you there.
Why private equity?
And
Talk about why you were saying that.
for him in particular, he had seen a lot of things, meaning he had seen companies go through transactions, go through sales. He had been a part of heavy M&A due diligence projects. He had sat in the accounting seat. He had sat in the finance seat. He had been a part of rebuilds, but he didn't know how to put all that experience together, package it, and position himself. And frankly, there are a lot of really successful people out there that don't know or don't like talking about themselves, me included.
I'm forcing you with this, yeah.
I know. And so, anyhow, I had said to him, I happen to have a key, well-known brand. It was an e-commerce retail brand. I can say it was part of Margaritaville in one way, shape, or form. Private equity backed. The CEO needs a right hand, but they don't want this very big wig CFO that just wants to delegate. They want someone that's humble enough to say, I'm going to build something and I know how to do it. And he got the job. He got the job and he beat out quite a few other CFOs. We were retained on the search, of course. And some of these other CFOs had already gone through multiple private equity transactions, but he was the right fit. He had great chemistry with the CEO. He was willing to grind it. He was willing to build. And that was about 10 years ago. So today he's on his second private equity backed CFO role. I ran into him recently and he said, I'll never forget you. We're positioning for an exit and it's going to be a 7-figure exit for me. Thank you. Thank you for giving me the nudge. So those, I get goosebumps because those are the stories that really make my job exciting and fun.
Is that common, Vivian? Like for an executive, do they a lot of times get equity, or does it just depend on the scenario? Is there like a common practice?
Sometimes it's almost like nails on a chalkboard for me, because there are so many times that I'll talk to a C-suite, whether it's a CEO, CFO, and they'll tell me, it was my first time working in private equity and I didn't know. I negotiated my own package and I don't have any equity. And that's where the value comes in from a candidate perspective, is not being afraid to say, I need someone that will represent me and will look out for my most equitable best interests, and still aligning with what the business needs. So not always do they get equity, but if you're going to work to build and double a company's revenue in 3 years and take it from $100 to $200 million company, or 500 million to 750, 800 million, which is really what the expectations tend to be, you're going to be working some really heavy hours. I always equate it to sitting in the president's seat of the United States. You look at when the president starts to when the end of his term is, they've got a lot more gray hair.
I think there was some before and after for Obama, and he looked like 40 years older or something in the picture.
They always have a few more gray hairs. Yeah. And that is truly what it is to sit in the C-suite and work with private equity. You're going to end up with quite a few more gray hairs at the end of it. And you should be compensated for it.
Or no hair.
Or no hair. You never know.
What are some other big mistakes people make? You mentioned maybe people are negotiating their own package. They don't get equity or don't even ask for it. What are some other mistakes that you see?
A key mistake I see on both sides, on the client, from a founder perspective, and not speaking for the PE sponsors, but there are frankly some PE sponsors out there. They're smaller cap, they're new, they don't know. One of the biggest mistakes that are made are There aren't true tactical initiatives that are communicated during the interview process. So, from a candidate perspective, they're accepting a role and they don't know what the expectations are. They're just going off of conversation. From the founder's perspective or PE sponsor, it's so important to be honest with that C suite that you're getting ready to hire. You're going to put a lot of dollars in front of them, not to mention, the optics within the company. So you want to make sure that you're really being thoughtful in how you're expressing what the expectation is going to be.
Frankly, I think
That's
that goes across every industry, right?
right. Really for any company, but it's funny how many times people forget. They get caught up in the dating romance of the process. They'll get excited about someone. There's great chemistry, but once they get in the spot, can they really deliver at the level that the sponsor is asking? And that's a big component of the CEO. You've got to make sure your C-suite is capable.
There was another situation that involved a public company. Can you talk about that?
So that one's a very recent one. Large public company, also extremely well-known brand globally. Majority owner is a private equity sponsor. Uniquely, private equity sponsor came recommended by a board member to me. And they called me up and said, hey, such and such a board member says, I need to work with you. You're the person. We've worked with the Shreks in the past, and half the time it doesn't work. So we want to see what's all the excitement about here. We have been in a 6-month transformational project with this public company and rebuilding their C-suite. And they happen to need a head of global tax. It was a really cool and exciting scenario in that they wanted an up-and-comer. They wanted an up-and-comer because one, from a competitive perspective, they knew they wouldn't be able to compete with dollars. And two, they wanted someone that was really going to have that grit, the grit we've been talking about. So I had met a KPMG leader 2 years before that. We had lunch. I knew we had a networking partner in common. We just met for lunch. And I said to her, I know you're early in your career, but one day I'm going to place you. I just know it. And she laughed because she was quite early in her career and she knew, the level of roles that we place. And so I just called her out of the blue and said, I know you're happy at KPMG. You're on a great track. I have an opportunity that you're not going to be able to say no to. And she went through the process, met with the CEO, the CFO, the whole team. This is I think she's probably 32, if that, pretty early in her career. And now she is sitting in the head of global tax for a public company. That to me gives me the goosebumps. It's one of those scenarios where that candidate would never have that type of opportunity so early in her career. And here you've got a company that's looking for something unique and they don't know where to find it. And I just so happen to have had lunch with a up-and-comer, highly talented Big Four 2 years back. All I had to do is pick up the phone.
Sometimes part of your job is just having to be an expert spotting talent. I mean, you're spotting it along the way. I'm curious, what are the characteristics that you look for? You mentioned obviously grit. What are the things that if you look back at some of the talent you spotted, again, someone early on in their career, maybe it's not obvious to most, but you've seen so many, candidates. What are you looking for? Grit. What else do you see?
So a big piece of it is humbleness. humbleness and really in any job is so important. Feeling the gratitude behind being able to sit in that seat, I think really it feeds a fire in somebody's belly. And that's really sort of the combo that I look for, is the humbleness and the fire always ends up with success. So I think doing this 25 years have seen it happen many a times where, I've spoken to someone or someone has come referred and said, I know I'm too early in my career. You can't help me, but can you give me advice? And today they're
What advice do you give them?
CFO. I had a Pulte Homes. We had he's now the youngest president, divisional president. And at the time he was probably I think a senior accountant. This was 15 years ago. You could just tell. You could tell how he presented himself. He was newly married. He didn't have any kids. He was just trying to find his way, and he was grinding it out, but he was so humble about it and was willing to lean in and leaned in anytime he could, put in the time. And now he's where he is, and people very well respected will continue to grow within Pulte. The advice I give him is make your own way. Don't compare yourself to anyone else. Come up with a plan that works for you, works for your family goals and your life. And don't be afraid to flex. Don't be afraid to flex. Don't be so rigid. Be open, but lean in.
Vivian, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing your journey, your stories. My last question is just, you mentioned success. I like to talk about how you define and think about the success cycle, which is kind of a mission putting out in the world, and highlighting different, leaders and thoughts. What does the success cycle mean to you?
So the success cycle came from really my story and the many stories that we've been a part of, and helping build organizations, talking to young up and comers. This isn't our parents' generation where you had leadership that was in their role 30, 40 years that were willing to take the time to mentor. Now businesses are built off of bottom line, and people move, twist and turn really quick. And so we wanted to build a mission-led brand that really would allow current successful C-suite and up-and-comers to hear people's stories, similar. Where did they come from? How did they get to where they are? Can they have a successful family life and a business career? How do you do that? Are there moments where you're afraid, and when were those? And to make it very relatable to people, so that if they don't have access to a mentor, this is a mission-led brand that we're saying, here are some mentors. Listen to their stories and take what you want from that and put it into your own daily life or planning.
I love it. I want to encourage people to check out parkcapitalsearch.com to learn more. And Vivian, thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like $100 grand.